The gravel crunched beneath Daniel's boots as he stepped back onto the property he had once vowed never to return to. Greenwood Hill hadn't changed much. The wrought iron gates still creaked as if sighing with memory, and the long stone path winding up to the estate was now swallowed by creeping vines and wild grass. It had only been 2 years. But time passed differently in a place like this. Slower, deeper. He remembered the rhythm of the house, the way the light fell through the kitchen windows, the scent of lavender that never left the sheets in the guest room. And most of all, her, Dana. She had been the fire he stepped too close to. Married, older, unreachable in every way that mattered. And yet, he had burned for her. When he left, he thought he was doing the right thing, for her. For himself. Now he wasn't so sure. He had received a message last week. Brief and strange. Return to Greenwood. There's work for you again. No questions. Just come. Signed by her husband, Mr. Granger. Daniel had nearly deleted it. But something, guilt, unfinished ache, or curiosity, dragged him back. As he reached the courtyard, the front door opened, and a child burst out. A little boy, maybe 2 years old, with tousled dark hair and impossibly familiar eyes. Green, not just green, but his green, that rare, gold-flecked shade he had seen only in mirrors and photographs from childhood. The boy stopped short when he saw Daniel, then grinned wide and ran straight toward him. "Daddy." Daniel froze. The word cut through him like a blade wrapped in honey. The air vanished from his lungs. He looked toward the door. Dana stood there, motionless, pale. Her eyes found his and held. She said nothing. She didn't move, but she didn't deny it. Daniel knelt, more out of instinct than clarity, and the child wrapped tiny arms around his leg. His name was Liam, the housekeeper would later whisper. No one ever told him who the father was. Dana never spoke of it. Over the following days, the estate returned to its rhythm, silent halls, a schedule shaped around absence. Mr. Granger was rarely home, always at meetings or calls behind locked doors. Dana drifted like smoke from room to room, barely acknowledging Daniel except in the garden, where she would linger longer than necessary, always careful not to stand too close. But Liam always found him. Every morning, he waited at the greenhouse steps. Every afternoon, he insisted on helping rake leaves or pick herbs. And every evening, he called Daniel, Daddy. Uncoached, uncorrected. It gnawed at him. Daniel began watching, not just the boy, but Dana, the way her eyes softened when Liam clung to Daniel's hand, the way her lips parted, just slightly, whenever their gazes met. It wasn't longing, it wasn't guilt, it was something else, a question unasked. And Mr. Granger, he watched too, not openly, but Daniel would find him near the hedges, pretending to be on his phone, or standing just beyond the doorway during dinner, silent, unmoving. One night, while trimming the ivy, Daniel heard the low murmur of a phone call drifting from the open office window. If he finds out, it's over, all of it, we lose everything. Daniel stopped breathing. He didn't confront anyone. Instead, he waited until Liam fell asleep the next night and carefully snipped a few strands of the boy's hair. He sealed them in a small envelope and mailed them to a private lab he had used once for a botany certification. Discreet, reliable. The waiting was unbearable. 3 days later, a plain white envelope arrived. No logo, just his name. Inside was a single page. Paternity probability, 99.97%. Daniel sat in the tool shed for over an hour, the paper trembling in his hands, sweat staining his collar. Outside, the sun set behind Greenwood Hill, casting long shadows over the earth. He could hear Liam's laughter echo faintly in the distance. He was a father, and no one had told him. But someone, had worked very hard to make sure he never knew. Daniel confronted Dana in the garden, the dusk light casting long shadows across the roses they once planted together. Her eyes, always soft and evasive, now welled with something heavier, guilt, sorrow, or a truth long held prisoner. He's mine, isn't he? Daniel's voice cracked but held firm. Liam is my son. Dana didn't respond immediately. She looked down at her hands, pale against the rich soil. Before nodding once, a single tear slid down her cheek. And when she finally looked up, her face was unreadable. "I wanted to tell you," she whispered. "I wrote letters. All of them returned. Granger, found out before I could send the truth. He locked down everything, my calls, my mail, my world. You let me leave thinking it was over," Daniel said, breath-catching. "You let me walk away from my own child. Because I was scared," Dana said, her voice cracked this time. "Scared of him, of what he would do if he knew Liam wasn't his." Daniel's jaw clenched. The ground beneath him felt less like earth and more like shifting sand. Everything he believed had been pruned and manicured like the garden around them, and just as deceptive. He took a deep breath. "I'm going to fight for him. For Liam. For my son." Dana looked up, startled. "No, don't, please. I have to." The very next morning, Daniel began the legal process. He met with a pro bono lawyer in town who agreed to take the case. Intrigued by the potential implications, a gardener suing a billionaire for parental rights. Mr. Granger responded faster than expected. That same afternoon, two sharply dressed attorneys showed up at Greenwood Hill. They served Daniel with a cease and desist letter and a restraining order petition, claiming he was harassing the Granger family with baseless allegations. Public interest ignited like dry brush. Within days, tabloids and social media caught wind of the scandal, an illicit affair between the madam and the gardener. A secret child, a legal battle threatening the image of one of the state's wealthiest couples. Dana became invisible in her own home. Mr. Granger kept her on a short leash, escorted to and from the estate by private security. She was no longer allowed to speak with Daniel, not even in passing. But one evening, as Daniel returned to the greenhouse, he found a folded note on the bench where Liam liked to sit. In Dana's handwriting, it read, "If I disappear, don't stop fighting, take him, raise him, he deserves the truth." The words seared into Daniel's memory like sunlight through glass. Soon, strange things began happening. His truck's tires were slashed. His tools went missing. The greenhouse was ransacked late one night. And then one morning, he found a black box affixed beneath his dashboard, a tracking device. He didn't report it. He knew better. Granger's reach was long, and local law enforcement's allegiance was murky at best. That same week, Daniel caught sight of Mr. Granger standing at the edge of the garden. Arms crossed, eyes unreadable. When their eyes met, the older man approached slowly, his smile thin and brittle. "I gave you a second chance, Daniel," he said, his tone low but sharp. "You should have stayed in the dirt. Don't make me choose again." Daniel didn't blink. "Maybe it's time you learned the truth always grows back," he said. Granger's smile vanished. That night, Greenwood Hill felt colder. Even the roses seemed to shiver under the wind. The courtroom was sterile and cold, dressed in polished mahogany and the kind of silence that chews at your nerves. The headlines had already painted Daniel as a scandal, the gardener's bastard. One tabloid called Liam, but for Daniel, this wasn't about gossip, this was about blood, about truth, about being a father. Granger's legal team came prepared, armed with documents that danced on the edge of truth and fabrication. A birth certificate listing Granger as the father, signed NDAs that Dana had allegedly agreed to, forbidding discussion of personal matters outside the household. A physician's statement claiming Daniel had no contact with Dana in the months preceding Liam's conception. But then Daniel stood, trembling fingers holding up a single document, the paternity test. The judge scanned the results, eyes narrowing. "This test confirms with 99.97% certainty that Mr. Daniel Reyes is the biological father of Liam Granger." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Dana was called to the stand. When she entered, the gallery froze. She wore a turtleneck despite the heat. Her cheeks swollen, purple bruising visible even under concealer. Her hands trembled as she took her oath. "Mrs. Granger," the judge began gently, "do you confirm this relationship with Mr. Reyes?" Dana's lips parted. For a heartbeat, Her gaze flicked to Daniel, pleading. Broken. Then she lowered her eyes. No, she said softly, there was no relationship. That child is not his. Daniel's world fractured. His lawyer reached to steady him as his vision swam. She's lying, Daniel hissed. Your Honor, she's terrified. But the judge remained composed. Do you have any corroborating evidence? Mr. Reyes. Daniel's attorney rose, placing a second file on the bench. A handwritten letter, Dana's, confessing everything. And alongside it, a voice recording, Dana and Granger arguing late at night. Her voice panicked. If he finds out, he'll take him from me. Don't do this. Granger's voice followed, chilling. Then keep your mouth shut. I won't lose everything because you got sentimental. The judge leaned back, sighing. The court acknowledges Mr. Reyes as the biological and legal father of Liam. However, due to Mr. Reyes' lack of financial stability and consistent housing, and considering the child's current environment, full custody will remain with the Granger household. It was a legal victory, and a personal death sentence. Daniel wept openly as the bailiff handed Liam over. The boy clung to his neck, tiny arms locked in desperation. Daddy, where are you going? He asked. Daniel couldn't speak. He only kissed his son's forehead, whispering, I'll find you, I promise. Mr. Granger took the boy without a word. As he turned to leave, he looked back at Daniel. He won't remember you. Dana didn't look back. She walked out with her head low, escorted by her personal assistant. But as she passed Daniel's bench, something slipped from her sleeve. A folded piece of paper. He caught it midair. Later that night, Daniel sat alone on his porch, rereading the note. I'm sorry, I had to lie. He threatened Liam, but you must keep trying. I believe in you. Headlights flashed down the driveway. A dark van, no plates, idled just beyond the gate. Daniel stepped into the shadows, every instinct screaming. He wasn't just fighting for love anymore. Now he was fighting to survive. It started as a whisper in the wind. Daniel Reyes was gone. 1 week after the courtroom storm, his rented room stood hollow. The landlord swore Daniel had left on a Tuesday morning, carrying only a duffel bag and his gardening gloves. The bed was made, the lights unplugged. There was no blood, no broken glass, just the lingering scent of tobacco and pine soap, and the absence of someone who had once clung to the idea of justice like it was oxygen. The police filed it as a voluntary disappearance, a man embarrassed by defeat, slipping quietly into some distant city to rebuild his pride. But neighbors whispered something else. A woman who lived across the hallway claimed she heard footsteps pacing frantically the night before he vanished. Another swore she saw Daniel at the corner payphone, hands shaking, looking over his shoulder as if chased by ghosts. Then came the envelope. A local mail carrier, old and meticulous, remembered Daniel, said the young man had handed him a thick, sealed packet 2 days before disappearing. It was addressed to whom it may concern, and contained a copy of the DNA results, court documents, and something more haunting, a handwritten letter that read more like a slow, bleeding suicide note. If you're reading this, it means I failed. I lost my son not because of the law, but because the truth means nothing to those who control it. Liam deserves better than a world like this. And if they come for me, let it be known, I never stopped trying. Dana tried to call him, over and over. Each time the number returned an automated message. This line has been disconnected. She visited the garden, the one Daniel used to tend before dawn. The roses were dying, but beneath a swaying hydrangea bush stood a single blue bloom, new, fresh, unnaturally vibrant. Dana knelt down, her fingers brushing its petals. No card, no signature, but she knew who had left it. Granger addressed the media with his usual polished smile. We hope Mr. Reyes finds peace. He was a passionate, if troubled, young man. Our prayers are with him. But peace was the last thing Dana found a week later. Liam had gone missing from his crib. The household staff claimed the boy had been with his nanny until 9 p.m., then vanished. He was discovered 4 hours later, locked inside the estate's greenhouse. crying amid the tall ivy and shattered flower pots. No one could explain how he got in, only that the security footage had gone dark that night for exactly 43 minutes. The footage that did leak, from a guard's cell phone, showed a grainy figure moving through the east garden. A man in a hood. Too tall to be a servant. Too cautious to be a thief. He paused by the moonlit fountain and looked directly at the lens before fading into the hedges. Daniel? The police shrugged. They launched no manhunt, no official theory, just filed the incident away. But Dana didn't sleep after that. Every creak in the hallway, every shadow outside the nursery window, every bloom that appeared in the garden unplanted. Something wasn't over, because ghosts don't lock greenhouses. And gardeners don't plant fear, unless they have nothing left to lose. A year passed. The estate at Greenwood Hill stood empty, the house sagging under the weight of stories too heavy to bear. No one wanted it, not after the scandal, the trial, the disappearance, whispers of corruption, fatherhood battles, and an unsolved vanishing wrapped the property like ivy choking brick. Then, one spring, it sold. A new family moved in. They were quiet, polite, wealthy in a clean, new money way. The wife liked orchids, the husband played tennis. They hired contractors to tear down the old gazebo, repaint the moldy shutters, and, most importantly, restore the wild, unkempt gardens. They brought in a landscaping crew, young men with machinery and gloves. Cheerful and oblivious, the western garden had been untouched for years, overrun with weeds and thorn bushes. When they dug near the oldest roses, now thorny skeletons of their former selves, someone hit wood. The box was no bigger than a lunch pail. Old, weather-beaten, sealed shut with rusted nails. Inside, layered in plastic and wrapped in cloth, they found a photograph, a young man in dirty jeans, holding a watering can, smiling beside a rosebush, written on the back, in ink that had barely faded. If truth dies, plant it deep. Beneath the photo were documents. A full DNA report confirming paternity, court transcripts, and at the bottom, folded in a silk handkerchief, a small child's necklace engraved with the initials, LD. The landscaper paused. The air around him seemed to still. He turned to the supervisor and said, quietly, "You should see this." The press storm came back with hurricane fury. DNA in the dirt. One headline screamed, "Missing gardener may have left final message." Police reopened the case, but by then, the files were missing, the trial records, misplaced, the custody hearings, lost in transition, the DNA samples, accidentally destroyed. No one could explain it. No one claimed responsibility. Some said the Granger family had paid to have it buried, both literally and administratively. Dana was never seen publicly again. She had moved to the countryside, far from the city, raising Liam in a small house with high fences and low trust. But when the news of the garden box broke, a package arrived, no return address. Inside, a single blue orchid. And a note, "Your son will always know who his father was." Dana wept for the first time in months. Liam, now 4, played alone in the garden. He was gentle with plants, almost reverent. That afternoon, as the sun dipped low, he kneeled by a rosebush and whispered something into the petals. Dana watched from the window. Her heart clenched. Later, when she asked what he had said, he replied simply, "Daddy says this flower never dies." In the final wide shot, the camera pulls away, past Dana, past Liam, past the rosebush, to the edge of the garden where a faded plaque juts from the earth. Just visible beneath the moss are 2 words. Rosa Daniel.